Okay, we're going to go live for the Sicha tonight. Okay, let's bring up the text. We're learning a Sicha. Again, this year we've been going a few of the Sichas of Tafshin Chavdalad 1964. So let's bring up the Sicha. Okay. So this is Sicha Shabbos Parshas Tzav, like this week, of course. Shabbos HaGadol also. Shabbos is the Shabbos before Pesach, called Shabbos HaGadol. And Ches Nisan that year fell on the 8th of Nisan from the year Tav Shin Chav Dalid 1964. So the Rebbe says like this. Let's see if the page is being shared. Okay. So the Rebbe says like this. They sang the song Achla Likim, which is from the Rebbe's Kapitel, I believe, of that year. Samach Beis, the Rebbe was turning 62, or from the Kapitel Samach Beis, that the Rebbe was finishing to say it this year of Nisan. Tziva Kveik Dush's Admir Shlita, the Rebbe asked, the Nagin Anigim in Mitzrayim Gealtana, did she sing the song in Mitzrayim Gealtana, the famous song of redemption? The song Hu Alekenu, also taught by the Rebbe, V'achach Tziva Nagin Oid Pa Machalikim. The Rebbe asked that they should sing the song again, Achalikim, which again was from the Kapitel, from the chapter of Tehillim that the Rebbe was finishing, because the Rebbe's birthday, of course, is on the 11th of Nisan. So the Rebbe was going into the chapter 63. They were finishing 62, and they were going to sing the song again from 62. Afterwards, the Rebbe said the Maimer, the Hasidic discourse, connected to the verse that says in this week's Parsha, Zos Tauras HaOla. This is the Ola. Let's make sure I got that. Hold on. Okay, sorry. Phase. Nizbar it's been explained Leil by Maimer and the Maimer. So make sure we have the right. Setting for the Zoom. Right, Shia. Okay. Well done. Sorry about this. I have to start again. Hold on a second. To share again. Okay. Sorry. Share the Sicha again. Okay, here we go. All right. Got it right. Okay, so the Rebbe says, Beis, Nisbar Le'il, we said before in the Maimer, but in Tefillah Asher, the Rebbe was talking in the Fabrenga and the Maimer about the idea of the Tefillah, the prayer of the rich man, which is the Tefillah of Moshe, which is chapter 90. Shekivan she'asher eini chaser me'uma. What's the definition of a rich person? The rich person is lacking nothing. So therefore, the Rebbe says, what is the definition of a rich person? That not only is a rich person that has everything that he could be lacking or she could be lacking, means there's no shortage of anything. Meaning, included in this is sus lircha of alav, horse to ride, which is a sign of success and wealth. The Eved Loris Stefanov, and not only that, but to add to that would be also a servant to run ahead of you as a sign of wealth, to announce your coming and show kavod. A person of true kavod, of true respect, of wealth, doesn't travel alone. So you have an Eved Loris Stefanov, not just to be with you to attend to to take care of your needs, but to run ahead, so to say, to show that you are someone of importance, of wealth. And here the Rebbe says, because we know the rule is that when it comes to charity, tzedakah, if a person was once wealthy and lost everything, and included in his or her life of wealth was a sus, a horse to ride, a servant used to run ahead of them. So you have to fulfill that need, that chesaron that it's lacking because they used to have it, now they don't have it. And that's not considered to make the person wealthy. That's making the person almost what's called the minimum of what that person is expected to have or used to having. So that's still not wealth. The fact that you have a horse, the fact that you have a servant running ahead of you. The Rebbe says the definition of the rich person is a higher level than just having everything you need. You're a wealthy person, which the Rebbe spoke about in the Maimon, which is even above than just not lacking anything. So that person who's in such a mindset. So what does it mean, tefillas asher, the rich man's prayer? The rich man can't be praying about anything that they're lacking because then they wouldn't be rich. So they're lacking nothing. So what does it mean that they daven? Hari tefillah shalai, the tefillah of the rich person is on ideas, on things that you can't even call it as if you're filling a need. Ki gam bil adam ein ze mitzat chitzaret. Ki gam bil adam ein ze mitzat shachitzaret. Whatever they're davening for is not because they're lacking. Because if they were lacking, they wouldn't be a rich person. Afilu lo yachitzaret dashiris. They're not even lacking a exaggerated amount of needs. Anything that falls under needs, if you're a person that needs something, that's not wealth. What does it mean? So what does it mean, the prayer of the rich person? Mm-hmm. The prayer of the rich person is the prayer for atzmus, for essence. That's even greater than the encompassing light, which is a shiras, because you have the encompassing light. So we know that there's the etzem, the essence of God, so to say, then his manifestation of the encompassing light. We learn about this. The way Hashem fills the world, which would be more in the realm of Ani. The Usher is living in the Imakiv, in the Soivev. Everything inside for sure he or she has, but is even in touch with the encompassing energy. So what are you davening for if you have the Sovev? You want the Etzem, you want the essence of God. It's still not enough. The Rebbe says it's still we have to understand. But Mashal Mover Medrash, Menegei Tefillas Asher. For instance, again, these are ideas that the Rebbe spoke about in the Maimer before the Sicha. We're starting with the Sicha, so we're missing out a little bit of the information. So the Rebbe says there's an example that's given from the Medrash with regard to the prayer of the rich person. Sha'amar Melech Le'echad, where the rich person says to the king says to the rich person, Ma'ata mevakesh, what are you looking for? What do you need? What do you want? Not what you need, but what are you seeking? Amalai Eini mevakesh, I don't seek anything. Ella, so what am I here for? Because I don't need anything. I'm an Ashir. Medina Plainis Shichariva Hivehisha. There's this country that's under your kingdom that's destroyed. Gaza Shitibana, I want you to build it. So it's not personal, because I don't live in that kingdom. But as the subject of the king, I know that in his kingdom there's a country that's destroyed. And similarly, the example of and that's the example the Medrash gives on the Tefillah Asher. The Asher has everything himself. That's Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe is not lacking anything. But he's davening a tefillah for others. He's davening a tefillah for the Medina, for the country that's Chareva. Someone else is lacking. So and similarly, this example of the Tefillah Asher, the tefillah of the rich person, is Medina Chareva. What does it mean, a country that's destroyed? How could you say that there's no lacking? If there's a country in the kingdom of the king, that's a great chitzar, that's a great lacking. Why is this the rich person's tefillah? If the rich person is identifying that there's lacking something because there's a country in the king's kingdom that's destroyed, then there's a chisaron. That's a chisaron. How could you say chisaron means something lacking? How could you say that the prayer of the rich person is lacking nothing, but prays anyways? You're saying that the rich person is lacking nothing. You're talking about a country that's destroyed. So you can answer simply. The difference between, in this case, the rich man's prayer and the poor person's prayer. So The difference is the person who's praying, not about the prayer. When you're praying on your own lacking, that's the definition of a poor man's prayer. If the lacking is for you, I lack, like we explained before, that the rich person is praying on someone else's kingdom, on another nation. But I have nothing that's lacking. But what am I praying? Why am I standing before the king? Moshe Rabbeinu has anything. He's not lacking anything. But Medina Chareva, in your kingdom is a country that's destroyed. You build that country, but it's not personal. That's the difference between a poor man's prayer and a rich person's prayer. Then it's how is that feels when you're praying for someone else. That's the definition of a rich person's prayer. That's why the rich person's praying on some country in your kingdom that's destroyed. Although the country itself is lacking, that country that's destroyed, it's destroyed. But it's not personal. The person who's praying on behalf of the destroyed country in the kingdom of the king, it's not his country. It's someone else's country. Someone else's city is destroyed. He's not praying for himself. For that nation that belongs to the kingdom. Then that's the definition of a Tefillah L'Moshe. Seemingly, that would be the answer. And that's why the Medrash says, the king sees the rich person and says, what are you here for? What are you seeking? Because I'm not seeking anything. I have everything I need. But in your kingdom, there's a country that needs something. But the Rebbe doesn't subscribe to that. Why? But in the Maimer that the Rebbe obviously quoted in the Maimer from the fifth Rebbe Chabad, the Rashab, Shalom Dov Ber Shneerson, Sha'alav Miyusa the Maimer Lil, which is what the Rebbe based his Maimer on this Shabbos Hagadol 1964. Mashma Shatfila Atzma Leirak Ala Odam Hamispalel He Tfilas Asher. From it seems that's not the definition of Mashma Tfila Atzma He Tfilas Asher. The prayer itself has to be a rich person's prayer. The prayers is a rich prayer, because here the prayer is a poor prayer, but the person who's praying is a rich person because it's not personal. It's not his loss. But the prayer itself is a poor person. It's a poor prayer because there's a country that's destroyed. But the Rebbe says no. The Rashab from the Shabbat's Mashma seems that the Tfilas Asher, the prayer itself is a rich prayer. So what does it mean? And obviously, what does this have connection to the Medrash's example of a person who's praying on another Medina, another country in your kingdom that's destroyed? So you even behegdim abir b'negel klaus in the Yetzias Mitzrayim. To understand this, we have to understand what leaving Egypt is, and we're learning this now because this is Shabbos Hagadol and getting ready for Pesach. We find two opposite ideas discussed about the exodus of Egypt. Number one is Geulah Mitzrayim, as when the Jews were in Egypt. The Jewish people were in the most degraded, low space. Right? They're slaves, literally. The Egyptians dictated, knew when they were pregnant, when they had kids. If they had boys, they threw them in the Nile. They were slaves. Got involved in their marital life. I mean, this really, you couldn't get lower than the Jewish people had experienced in those final years, this final 86 years in Egypt, and the whole 210 years, really. The difficulty of the actual exile, which included in it the physical enslavement. It didn't only affect men and women, it affected the children. As the Medrash teaches us, they would put Jewish children live into the building in place of bricks. Talking about horrible decrees, the levels of what was going on in Auschwitz and etc. You can't say that they did anything deserving of punishment. What do these little children do that they should be put into the building system? If they're not possible to be punished, then obviously it wasn't a punishment. You can't punish someone who's not deserving of a punishment. God is tzedek. There's justice. What it is, we don't understand. But you can't say that they did anything that they're punished for. So one was they were mamish yorah, they were mamish degraded physically and also spiritually. Because we know that they're not disconnected. Jewish spirituality is connected to Jewish physical situations. Our spiritual health is related to our physical health. So if we're spiritually, if we look at our physical health and see the situation of Egypt, we know clearly there's something wrong with our spiritual health. We know that our Gashmis and Ruchnis are connected, and the Gashmis is a result of our Ruchnis. Our physical is a result of our spirituality. Where were the Jewish people living? In Egypt, the most corrupt of all countries. It was called the most abomination of a country. Not just where they lived, they themselves were sunk into the 49 gates of impurity. And that's one of the reasons why Egypt, the exodus of Egypt had to be in the middle of the day. Magid to teach us, as soon as the second of redemption arrived, God didn't keep them for a blink of an eye. The movement seemingly is not seen. It's not understood. We know, as we discussed before, that the Jewish people stopped being enslaved physically. The slavery fell apart from already Tishrei, meaning Rosh Hashanah time, prior to the redemption. Meaning to say, but how many months we go from Chodesh HaShvi to Chodesh Rishon? It's 5 months, 6 months. So for 5-6 months there was no slavery. They stayed in Egypt till Nisan. So what was the rush? It wasn't like they were being beaten and we had to get them out. They stopped being enslaved from Tishrei. So God could have taken his time. Why do you have to rush out in the middle of the day as soon as the moment came? Had they remained in Egypt another blink of an eye, then they would have fell into the 50th gate. They could have fell into the 50th gate. And then they would be unredeemable. There would be no chance for redemption. If that's the case, what do we see? That they left Egypt in the most degraded, low situation, physically and spiritually. The very fact that that's how it was, it had to be this way. Again, therefore, he had to leave Egypt immediately because otherwise they would have fell into the 50th gate. The Rebbe says an example in tzedakah is like you give when you give just a minimum amount to a poor person to live, before you give them the additional, you have to give them right now. They need food right now. So too the Jewish people needed to get out immediately. That's one thing. The Jewish people were mamish on the lowest space. On the other side, we find God said, whoa, 1 second. Make sure you walk out wealthy. Borrow money, take money from the Egyptians. Gold and silver, expensive clothing. Please speak into the Jewish people like we've studied before. Man should borrow from his neighbor, the woman from her woman neighbor, gold and silver. God wanted the Jewish people to walk out in Ashiras. Okay, so we're going back again from the beginning of the talk, that Ashiras is not just you're lacking something. Ashiras is another whole mindset. Like the Rebbe, even the Rebbe Rashab says, it's not even that you're praying for a country that's lacking something. Ashiras is literally in another space than Anias, than poverty. So here the Jewish people were holding a blink of an eye away from falling into the 50th gate of Tumah, of impurity. They had to get out immediately. And at the same time, it was important that they go out in the way of Ashiras. These are two different extremes of the spectrum here. Seemingly just get them out. One could ask the question, what's this whole idea? What's the point, really? What's the necessity? I mean, you could of this great Ashiras, this great wealth, when we're dealing with a situation where the Jewish people are about to fall into the 50th gate and they have to get out immediately. The Gemara teaches us. Yisrael L'Moshe. The Jewish people told Moshe. When Moshe came to the Jewish people towards the end, it happened before the plague of darkness, right? Because the plague of darkness, right after the plague of darkness. So before the night of the 14th going into the 15th, before the Paschal Lamb, before the plague of the firstborn, right? So Moshe goes to the Jewish people. God says, so Moshe goes to the Jewish people and he says, you got to go get money. You have to walk out wealthy. So what did the Jewish people tell Moshe? The Gemara tells us what they told Moshe. So Amri Yisrael and Moshe, the Jewish people told Moshe, when Moshe, in response to Moshe's command that they have to go out with the Rechush Gadol, go get the gold and silver. Well, let us just leave. We're happy just to get out. Why are you talking to us about getting gold and silver? We just need to get out of Egypt. Moshe Laden, like a person, a person, let's say, was locked up in prison. People told him, getting you out. Tomorrow, from the imprisonment. We're going to give you a lot of money. So the person who's in prison says, don't wait till tomorrow so you can give me money. Just get me out now. And forget about the money. Every second I'm in prison is horrible. So too over here, they tell Moshe, this is time consuming. Why are we talking about getting out with money and rich and have to go to borrow? And let's just get out. They don't care about the great wealth. Take us out of Egypt. So what did the Gemara answer? That it wasn't a request, it was a necessity. Because God didn't want Avram to come back later to him with tinus, with complaints. Yeah, we had a deal, right? 430 years before the night of leaving Egypt, Avram has a vision and he's 75 years old. But he's 70 years old, 5 years before he even leaves to Eretz Canaan, before Lech Lecha. He has a vision where there's the conversation of the Bris Ben Absarim, the covenant between the flesh. In it, after Avram chose Geulah, God tells him, your children will be enslaved 400 years in a foreign land. Avram, but then, don't worry about it, they're going to walk out, but they're going to walk out wealthy. So God didn't want later Avram to say, 1 second, time out, he's calling foul. We had a deal. You said that they're going to walk out wealthy, and he just pulled them out without any money. That wasn't part of the deal. So the Gemara says, Avram, so that righteous person, our forefather Avram, shouldn't complain and call foul on God and say, the enslavement that you did. But that walking out with wealth, that didn't happen. The Rebbe says that still doesn't answer the question. That the Gemara says that Moshe, the Jewish people had to do it, so God should be able to cover his back, so to say. Lahavdil. We know what does it mean that when the person's locked in prison and says, I don't care, just get me out now? Is the nature when a person's in Geulah, they don't care about anything else. They just want to get out of the exile. Let it be 1 minute first, right? You're all waiting for the Geulah. Imagine we find out that whatever's holding up the Geulah now, that didn't happen yesterday, didn't happen the day before, was something that we're ready to be forgiving for. Just get out of Geulah. The Rebbe says the whole story also doesn't make sense. You're telling Avram that you made a promise to Avram. Avram himself would be understanding, well, why did you make the promise to Avram? Just get them out. When the time is ready, if this is now time ready, now we have to waste another day, 2 weeks, whatever it is, to get out Rechush Gadol. Let's just forget that part of the deal. This Rebbe says obviously shows us a lesson. Hold on a second. What the Rebbe is really asking is basically, why did God make the promise to Avram? God knows everything, and He knows that the end of the deal, meaning that they're going to walk out with wealth, is time consuming. So everyone would be understanding that we don't want that. Okay. So Rebbe says, this has to give us a lesson. What does it mean to leave exile? When God promised Avram that they're going to leave with tremendous wealth, what does it mean, and how is it possible for a person to leave from a gullus, from an exile? And this is not just talking about collective exile, but the individual exile as well. From the lowest place, really, you couldn't reach lower, you couldn't fall lower on all fronts. The way to get out is when one knows, from the beginning, Rebbe said an amazing thing. That this was part of the tradition. This is what the Jewish people knew. The Jewish people knew that the definition of redemption is Rechush Gadol. The entire time in Geulah, as hard as it was, they knew that Geulah doesn't. That what is the definition of Geulah? Is not just to get out of Geulah. Because then what's the point of the Geulah in the first place, right? the Straits of Hormuz was open before the war announced reopens. What happened? What we accomplished, right? So you can't go back to square one. So you have to say that the Rechush Gadol is something much greater than what you had never had before. Not just any kind of great wealth. Rechush Gadol lefi hamusagim shel Avram Avinu v'Kadosh Baruch Hu, the way God and Avram understand what it means wealth. That when a person's enslaved, and wealth is a piece of chicken, because yesterday I was eating rice. Nothing against rice, but talking about you had nothing. So for yesterday's this situation, the smallest amount of luxury is wealth. No, we're talking about from Avram Avinu's perspective, who was physically, spiritually wealthy, and God's perspective, obviously knows what wealth is. Avram Avinu she'anemar alav v'Avram kavid ma'oid b'mikne kesef v'zav. Avram was physically very wealthy. The Torah testifies. Avram was kavid, means he was heavy with money, with animals, with gold and silver. So when you talk to Avram and the way he was in his wealth, he understands what it means wealth. It's on his level. God knows what wealth is. Gold and silver belongs to God. What does it mean that Geulah, when you're in Geulah, you know the whole Geulah is connected to that? What is the definition of Geulah? To walk out with wealth. A person knows initially going into a situation. The definition of leaving an exile cannot be just to get to the norm. That can't be your goal. I need to get to some sort of stability and normalness in my life. There has to be a goal that whatever is going on now is taking me to a place of wealth, and like the Rebbe says, what's wealth? That there's absolutely nothing lacking, and a tremendous abundance of rechush, of property. And you have to notice something else. That if you didn't achieve that, if that's not what is achieved, then there's no real redemption here. What does this mean? What's the explanation? A regular person, you say, okay, you're in exile, you get out. It's over. That's for regular people, the Rebbe says. We're talking about the Jewish people, the children of Israel. The Jewish people are kings. It's a quote in the Gemara. Brachas, the Gemara in Brachas in the first Masechta of Brachas, page 9. The Bnei Yisrael who are princes, who are kings, they can't just go to a regular situation. They're in a situation of ashirus, of wealth, and abundance of property. Even if temporary, it's not like that. And when a situation of gullus, of exile, the Jew has to know what is really your situation. You're not compromising on where you should be. The Rebbe is talking about, obviously, we're not just talking about the physical gold and silver. We're talking about where's your mindset, where you plugged into, where's your real place. It's not just to get relieved from this difficult situation of gullus. That's not where you belong. That's not your place. And not only that, when you're in gullus, right? What's your shi'ifa? Shi'ifa means in Hebrew that's your desire. When a person's in Geulah, like the person who's in prison, says, "Get me out right now." What is it? What is it? What does this translation mean? When the person says, "Get me out right now," forget about the money. Get me out a day earlier, right? Why? Because in their mind, as far as they can see, where they should be, or where they belong, or where they at least desire to be, is just not here, just to be out. But a Jewish person has to know, no matter how hard your situation is, no matter how low you've fallen spiritually, physically, no matter what we're talking about, both. You're to survive this or to just get out of this that's not your place. That's not what defines you. Your place is mamish in the level of Avram and God talking in their mindset of well. Even if the Jewish people are in exile for a moment, they have to know where's my place? Where do you come from? What's your life should be like? It's not just Mabakach means, okay, whatever it is, just get me out of here. Your place is in wealth. The Rebbe says to be more specific. The Rebbe says there was many stages in our leaving of Egypt. Like we said before, they stopped the actual enslavement in Tishrei 5 months prior. Meaning to say, like we said, it was a month, almost every by halfway through the plagues, it was obvious Egypt is not winning this, right? The fighting goes on, but the war is over. So and there was the 10 plagues. Until the final plague, midnight. But still they didn't leave. Right? But the Makkah B'choris, the 10th plague, was midnight. They only left 12 hours later. Yetzias Mitzrayim, middle of the day. And they continued to grow. And that was part of the leaving of Egypt, the splitting of the Red Sea, the counting of the Omer, then the giving of the Torah, and the 40 years of being in the desert, which incidentally happened on the 10th of Nisan, which is tomorrow, until they entered the land. And even entering the land wasn't the complete moment. Till they built the base of Mikdash 300, what did Shlomo Melech said? 400 years after the leaving of Egypt. Ribu Shanim Lachers, there many years afterwards. V'shmoina Shanim, in the 80th year of Abba Meir Shanel Tzeis Bnei Yisrael Meretz Mitzrayim, Shlomo Melech says, when did they dedicate the temple on Jerusalem, on Temple Mount? 480 years from leaving Egypt. But the idea is a person has to know that there's two things over here. The avoida b'payal, the work itself of achieving redemption, getting to Temple Mount with Shlomo HaMelech, is 480 years after Egypt, and there's so many stages of processes of gains and losses, right? There was setbacks. The golden calf and the spies and Korach, and with the judges, what was going on over there, and even in the time of Saul, David had setbacks. But until the moment of Shlomo Melech standing on Temple Mount. But the person that says, you don't jump ahead, you don't skip ahead, you go through the process step by step. Like it says, God could have taken them the short route. You could have, right? Anyone knows? My son literally is on his way now back from Eilat, from South Africa. It literally took him almost 30 hours, over 30 hours, that he's trying to get from South Africa. He had landed in Cairo, and he had to get to Sharm el Sheikh, and then from there take Mamish. It's a whole that's the longer way. If you drive, everyone knows you drive the coast, and you're in Gaza, whatever. You're in Ashkelon. You go into Eretz Yisrael. That's the short path. God could have taken them the short path through Plishtim, but that Karivu, it's close. But they didn't want to skip the process. You have to go in an orderly way. Slowly we're going to kick out all the negativity, all the nations. Nevertheless, from the moment you leave Egypt, even before they actually left, from the first stages of redemption, there is the knowledge and the resolve that the Jewish people know, based on where they are. They're not Never be satisfied with just the stage of getting out of Egypt. Never be satisfied with just standing by the mountain, right? We say, what do we say? Dayenu, 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 but nevertheless, Allah has come v'kama. It didn't happen like that. We went all the way to Binyan Beis HaBechira, building the Beis HaMikdash. We know that we can and we have to desire for the full story, which is Temple Mount, with Shlomo Melech. And that's the mindset of the rich person. Thinking rich. Thinking that you're not a chesaron when no matter what the situation is, whatever the chesaron is, if standing by Har Sinai is a chesaron to Har Sinai, is a lacking, or lacking is King Saul, but it's not King David, it's not the Davidic kingdom. And David, it doesn't have the temple yet. Oh, that he's the 14th stage. Shlomo was the 15th stage. So if a person is thinking always, going, oh, this is great, that's not thinking rich. Knowing rich is Rechush Gadol knows that when you're standing there in Egypt being beaten with the whip, you see the Beis HaMikdash. You see Shlomo Melech. You see that's where I'm going. Lahar, the Rebbe says, the point is, Piska and Kvaiktish Admar is the saying of my father-in-law. The Pirsha Kosif, when the verse that says, Vayiro Eisanu HaMitzrim, it says, Vayiro Eisanu HaMitzrim, that the Mitzrim made it bad for us. Vayiro Lanu, Eisanu not Lanu. So Shesichim Lihazish HaMitzrim La Yasa Eisanu Roim K'moisam. That the idea is Vayiro Eisanu HaMitzrim, what they were trying to make us bad. Not to do bad to us. We have to make sure that no matter what you experience, you go through in the Gullahs doesn't turn you into a person of exile. And what is that? What is included in that? The Gullahs shouldn't make you a person of exile. And so Rebbe spoke about this in the last years. Be a person of Geulah. Be a person of redemption. Is the thermometer, the sign of being a person that's a person of exile, is when you're just happy to get away from the bad. Just to get back to the norm. Stop beating me. But the idea of that the Egyptians didn't affect means the mental effect that the Egyptians try to have in breaking the spirit of the Jew is to downgrade what defines my redemption, what defines where I should be. That if the effect of the Egyptians is that my goal is just to stop being beaten by the Egyptian, they won. Even if they stop beating you, they broke your spirit of your she'ifah, of your desire of Beis HaMikdash, of redemption, of the highest point, of Ashiras. They made you satisfied with just getting the chesaron, stopping the pain. So that's what the Friedrich Rebbe says, that to make sure they try to make us bad, to put us into a bad space. That yes, you could do bad to me, but you're not going to make me bad. You're not going to put me into a space of gullahs. A person, even when they're in gullahs, a person has to know clearly. And the clarity. You never give up and you never downgrade where you belong. And you belong as an Ashir. And that's why Moshe, that's why when Avram and Yaakov, it's amazing what the Rebbe is saying. That when Avram when God speaks to Avram, and he gives him over that afterwards, and Avram sitting in the height of his wealth, and God is Aliv Kesav Liazav, that he tells Avram, your children will never lose their identity of being Avram's children. They'll never lose what it means to be an Ashir. That's what its true Geulah means. And the Rebbe says this is connected to the idea, what it means that even in Egypt they were thinking temple. Amr Chazal, our rabbis teach us, Yaakov Avinu Tzav Baruch HaKodesh. Rashi quotes this many times in the Parshas of Shemais, that our father Yaakov saw with divine vision, Shasidim Yisrael Livneis Mishkan B'Midbar, that the Jewish people are going to build a tabernacle in the desert. And he takes down the trees needed for the beams of the Beis Hamikdash, of the Mishkan. He takes it down from when he leaves Egypt. God Got to go down. Yosef's there. He's going to save you. Yaakov says, oh, Chevra, go. We got to get the trees. Why? We're taking them down to Egypt because in 210 years they're going to leave and they're going to need trees for the base of Mikdash, for the Mishkan, for the walls, for the crushing. He planted them in Egypt. And he commanded the Jewish people that when they leave Egypt, don't forget, take the trees with you. And he told them, why? Because when you're going to leave in 200 years from now, whenever that is, you're going to leave years from now. After who knows, there's a lot going to happen in between that moment. But when you leave, you're going to go into the desert and God's going to command you to build a Mishkan. And the Mishkan is going to require beams of atzei shitim, of wood. Make sure you have it available. He's talking to them about Geulah. He's talking about Beis HaMikdash before they even go into the exile. And Rashi says also, included in that, was that central piece that connected the whole Mishkan. Yaakov Avinu had a special branch that was able to go from one side of the crushim through all the openings all the way to the other side, like a U shape. He said that has to go in also. That was a special from a special tree that Yaakov planted. They had the Bria Chatichon from Yaakov's days. Kleimer, what's the message here? That although they weren't going to build a Mishkan for many years, and a whole year after leaving Egypt, and surely the temple that was only Tov Pei Shana 480 years later, Yetzias Mitzrayim. Nevertheless, when Yaakov, before they even go down to Egypt, before even the enslavement started, they never lost focus of where they belong. They belong to having a tabernacle. And he prepared for it physically. He literally brought trees with him. And the completion of the Mishkan was 480 years later when Shlomo built the temple on Temple Mount. And that mindset that Yaakov has is not isolated to Yaakov, because you know that Yaakov is what's called an neshama klolis, a general soul, that in him is all the souls of the Jewish people throughout all times. Everyone has a spark, a nitzis Yaakov Avinu. Shizui Yoni Shal Nasi. And this is the idea of a Nasi, Rashi Tevis, Nitzutze Shal Yaakov Avinu, and this is also the leadership throughout the generations. That the Nasi, this prince of the Jewish people, is the major spark of Yaakov in each generation. Poel Yaakov v'kol Bnei Yisrael, Yaakov affects within the Jewish people. She'etzlam, she'etzal kulam, by every Jew, Tiyachon Asiyas HaMishkan. Everyone is always ready, has it within them, the mindset, the mental space, the physical ability to build a Mishkan, the Yikrei Mikdash, which is the temple, Oid Yetzias Mitzrayim, even when you're in Egypt. Even when things seem dark, you mamish hit rock bottom and you don't even see a way out. You have to know that you are connected to something that's going to happen. That's your space. A Beis HaMikdash. How does this happen? Bnei Yisrael also kedvar Moshe. And this is when the Jewish people, although as hard as it was, and they weren't plugged into the idea, they did what Moshe said, Vishol, Mitzrayim, Kli Chesed, Kli Zav. They went and borrowed gold and silver from the Egyptians. So it could fulfill the vow that Moshe said, that God told Avram that they're going to leave with great wealth, i.e., like we said, they're never going to lose their focus of Geulah, of redemption. They're never going to forget who they are, where they belong. Because the money that they took out was how they were enabled to build and to donate the monies needed for the Mishkan. We could say, we could say that this the Yaakov Avinu planted these trees in Egypt. And the idea that the Jewish people went out and took gold and silver so they could have the money to donate to the Mishkan. It's a continuation of Yaakov's vision. It means you have a prophecy. Yaakov sees in the spiritual divine but there's going to be a Mishkan. So, okay, fine. So I know it. Yaakov sees it spiritually. No, he doesn't just see something spiritually. He acts on it. He goes and takes trees because he sees it physically. He makes sure his children take out gold and silver because even though that we're not holding dear this second, but that's the prophecy. Make the prophecy now. Get involved physically in that prophecy. Al derech hasiyas hamishkan b'poel, k'fi shemitzina b'kam nevuos and toisef. Al gila dvar Hashem nevuah atzma, ruach Hashem diber bi, nistav anavim lasis puluk ashmis. We know that throughout time, when God spoke to the prophets, part of the thing was the prophets did physical things. You have to get fit. When Hashem speaks to Isaiah, he literally goes and takes a woman of the street because that's a message that he's talking about. It's not just a nevuah and a concept. Okay, Yaakov saw. When it happens, it happens. No, because Yaakov sees, he goes and plants trees. He acts on it. So when you act on it, when it becomes real to you, it's not just a vision or a prophecy, but you act on it, it assures and it affects that it should be, that this nevuah should actualize and come into being. The Rebbe continues to explain the hayrah from this, how we're supposed to act on this. But I think the message is clear. Beautiful Sicha. We learned a very similar Sicha before in the beginning of Shemais. Let's just read this last paragraph of the talk. The Rebbe says, "V'zui gam hayrah." This is also lesson to our actions now. Throughout the time of the exile that we're still in. And that we know that the days of Geulah is how the days of Mashiach are going to be complete. Although and while we're still standing in the double darkness of the times of exile. Like they said, there's a city that's destroyed in the kingdom. And that city is Yerushalayim, right? Where's the Beis Hamikdash? Yoidim, we know what has to be. And we ask, we're not satisfied. We know we want that it should be the actually rebuilding of the city. Binyan Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, with the rebuilding of the third temple, which is Binyan Yitzchi, an everlasting building. Because it's the building of Hashem. It's already built and ready, and will come down from heaven on Temple Mount. With the true redemption when Mashiach comes speedily in our time. I wish everyone Laila Tov, and we're not going to have obviously the class next week. It's the middle of Pesach, but we're going to have classes Matzah Shabbos in Halacha and Likutei Torah on Sunday night, and the Shmuz, and then hopefully we'll get an Akshir Gemara on Tuesday night. Laila Tov, everyone. Good Shabbos. Have a wonderful Shabbos Hagadol.